Sigmund Freud defines the id as the impulsive, childlike portion of the psyche that operates on the pleasure principle, only taking into account what it wants and disregards all consequences. The id is also short for ideas from the deep and in demand. All three of these meanings are associated with one of the most influential companies within the video game industry, id Software. It's time to give the id Software games the GGBeyond treatment. We're going to explore the id. I hope you enjoy this. To begin exploring the id, we'll start with a very brief story. In the late 80s, there was a company called Softdisk, who also goes by other names at times, such as Softdisk Publishing and Softdisk Magazette. The company was falling on hard times since the business revolved around the dying Apple II platform. 25 people were laid off in a single day, and the company's only chance they had was a man who was getting fed up with the work conditions. His name is Alfonso John Romero. Of course, we all know him as simply John Romero. He took some flack from his superiors for having his music too loud and for turning off the lights to remove the glare from the screen. He was promised to make big commercial games, but was instead making utility programs and rewriting other people's code. He was essentially the MVP of the company. He had to put some pressure on his employer. Let me make video games, or I go work for LucasArts. As a result, Romero formed a new division within the company, and Gamer's Edge was born. This was a bi-monthly games disc for Softdisk subscribers. To make this work, they needed another programmer. As a result of a meeting that left a very strong impression, a 19-year-old freelance programmer from Kansas City, Missouri, also agreed to help with Gamer's Edge. His name? John D. Carmack II. John Carmack. They had 2 months to release the first disc to their subscribers, but before they can get to work, they needed to turn their new office into a proper work environment. Throughout their first week, they brought in a used fridge, a microwave, and a boombox. They removed the light bulbs from their sockets so they can never be turned on. They even brought in an NES and a video game for their quote-unquote research. Suffice to say, the other employees complained. Management explained the situation to them. Gamer's Edge was there to save the company, but they also needed to show results much sooner. Instead of the 2 months they had to work on their first release, they now had 4 weeks. 4 weeks! And they needed 2 games. Not enough time to partially complete one, but they came up with the perfect solution. They simply ported their Apple II games to the PC. Both Carmack and Romero created several games in the past for the Apple II, and they chose 2 of them for the debut of Gamer's Edge, Dangerous Dave and Catacomb. First, we'll take a look at John Romero's game, Dangerous Dave. This game was originally made in 1988. It's played out like a traditional video game of the 70s and 80s, where the entire game occurs in a non-scrolling playfield. The object of the game is to collect a trophy in the level, and then get to the door to move on. When you touch the edge of the screen, the view will change to a new portion of the level in one clunky movement. The game is 10 levels long, so don't expect a lot of playtime. You can acquire a jetpack to fly around the level, and a gun to take out any monsters in your way. The jetpack has limited fuel, so you have to get as far as possible before you run out. The gun can only fire 1 bullet at a time. You have to wait until the bullet disappears before you can fire again, but you have unlimited ammo. These items must be reacquired in each level. The controls are simple enough. Control is to fire the gun, Alt is to use the jetpack, and the up arrow is to jump. The game has a few very mysterious monsters. They range from 4-legged spiders that shoot things at you, to spinning balls that shoot things at you. It takes one bullet to kill them, but their movements require your shots to be timed precisely. The levels are challenging with all the different things that can kill you, not just the monsters, but the fire, water, and weird weeds, as it's called. These will toast Dave very blackly, according to the help section. The tiles in the levels are arranged in a way to make a platforming maze. The arrangement may not make sense at times, but there's really no problem with this. The graphics and sound are nothing special, but if you do play this game, do yourself a favor and turn off the sound, especially if you're using headphones. The sound you make when you walk around will just hurt your ears. It's a very wonky game. Playable, challenging, and easy on the eyes, not on the ears. This game is now freeware, so feel free to download it and try it out. Now we have the game by John Carmack, Catacomb, or in the original Apple II version, Catacombs. This game had a clunky, tile-based scrolling gameplay, but it's playable. You take control of a magician who's been contracted to destroy monsters. The goal is to reach the magical mirror in the level. The gameplay consists of fighting monsters and finding secret passages hidden in the walls. There's no visible indication that there's a secret within the walls, so you have to search them by attacking them. If the wall is still there after an attack, there's nothing there. Some walls have some text to give you some hints on where to go, but it really comes down to exploring the level and searching every wall. You use the control key to attack. You can shoot small fireballs in rapid succession, or you can charge up your attack to unleash a larger fireball that goes through enemies. The Alt key is to move without changing the direction you're facing. This is very useful when running away from monsters, or when you want to search a wall quickly. The Bolt spell is basically a barrage of large fireballs. The Nuke spell decimates enemies in the surrounding area. These spells are used with the B and N keys, respectively. You can also heal yourself with a potion with the spacebar. A single potion will restore you to full health. This can be abused due to the sheer abundance of potions in the game, but the monsters can drain your health very quickly. The controls are easy to learn, but the distance between control and the B and N keys make them less than ideal when the action picks up. The monsters cannot be identified. The ones at the end of the game take up a large chunk of tiles to show off more detail, but everything else looks like a teddy bear. Maybe they're demons and skeletons, but just look at them. Speaking of which, the overall graphics are simple in the good sort of way. You can easily tell between the walls and floors, items, and monsters. The game offers 16-color EGA graphics at its best, so the pink walls are justifiable. There was a sequel for this game called The Catacomb. It's essentially the same game with new levels. Overall, these are very simple games. Checking every nook and cranny will be tedious, but a kid with lots of free time won't mind this. But the most important thing to note about these games is its ability to scroll as the player moves. The screen was scrolling one chunky tile at a time. This solution worked, but this was less than ideal. For their future games, they wanted the scrolling to be much smoother. Around this time, the Gamer's Edge team requested some extra talent. They had a couple people on their list. The first was Tom Hall, a programmer from the Apple II department and managing editor of Softdisk's Apple II subscription disk. Because of his role in that department, management couldn't spare him. He would still drop by and help out in an unofficial capacity with the game design and silly characters. The other was Adrian Carmack, worked in the art department, and is not related to John Carmack. He worked on the graphics for the games, so Carmack and Romero could focus on coding. Side-scrollers were the cash cow of the late 80s. This scrolling mechanic became popular in 1980 with an arcade game called Defender. What made it stand out was its ability to present a game world larger than the screen, much more presentable than the clunky transition between different areas in the game. Along with this and Super Mario Bros. For the NES, They both led the charge and made side-scrollers the hottest games on the market. So the team decided the next game they wanted to make would have to be a side-scroller. This was called Slordax. You shoot down your enemies and pick up power-ups. Simple enough. Your ship fires a single shot initially. As you collect power-ups, you can fire 2 shots and finally 3 shots that spread out. Control is to fire your weapon. You have to constantly tap the control key to fire in rapid succession until you collect the automatic fire power-up. The enemies come in waves, as was common in these games. What's uncommon is instead of disappearing behind you, they just bounce around the screen until you kill them. The problem starts when the enemies start to build up on the screen. They like to stay near the bottom, which makes them much more difficult to kill. Here's something else. On the planetary levels, you can crash into the terrain. You'd think you can fly over the trees and mountains, being in a spaceship and all, but this is not the case. You're also not able to fire through them. The graphics are at least decent. The space and terrain look good, and the enemies have that trademark silliness from Tom Hall. The sound from the PC speaker was okay as well. The game is just frustrating as hell, yet still decent if you can get past its oddities. But for the Gamer's Edge team, this wasn't good enough. The scrolling was performed much like a treadmill, at a fixed rate, and in only one direction. They wanted real smooth scrolling graphics. They wanted the world to scroll on demand from the player. This was just another stepping stone, one step closer to making history.